Hello, everyone. This is Ankit Tomar. I'm one of the co-founders and CTPO of Bizongo. Bizongo is a B2B supply chain enablement platform for enterprises, where we help enterprises manage their vendor base, automate their supply chain, and also give them supply chain financing, enable their manufacturers to get supply chain financing. Today, I'm going to be focusing on the topic of building and structuring product teams for growth. So yeah, let's get started. So before we go deeper into the topic of building and structuring product teams, there's something that we need to understand. There is no one size fits all. There is no one way of structuring a product team for all businesses which works best. There are guidelines. There are ways that different businesses have tried, experimented with. But before you can decide which structure works for your product team, how do you look at structuring your product team? You need to be able to answer 4 questions very well. What are those questions? First, who are your customers? Who do you sell to? What are their needs? Do you focus on B2B customers, enterprise customers? Do you focus on B2C? Even inside B2B, do you focus on large enterprises? Do you focus on mid enterprises? Do you focus on B2C? What kind of customers do you focus on? Which stage is your company in? Are you in early stage? Are you in mid stage? Are you in a stage where you're just ready to grow, or you're already in growth stage, right? At that point of time, what are your business goals? Like, are you looking to specifically accelerate? Are you looking to build for profitability? There are different questions that you need to answer in order to make sure that you structure your product teams well. Another question that usually you need to be able to answer is, do you have multiple products or a single product line? When I say multiple products, what does it mean? Right? Do you have multiple products focused on different personas? Because sometimes people are building full stack platforms, right? In Bizongo's case, there are platforms across for different personas. There's a platform for collaboration for brand managers, your packaging development guys, as well as your designers. And there is a platform for supply chain financing, as well as handling your entire procure to pay for supply chain professionals, as well as your procurement guys. So these are different personas with different product lines. So do you have different product lines? Do you have different personas that your product lines target to? Or do you have a single product that you target for your customers? Right? So once you've answered these 4 questions, and let's go deeper into the first question first, like sort of from a basic standpoint, define what's the differentiation? Like if you're targeting a B2B customer or you're targeting a B2C customer, what's the basic differentiation? As a product manager, what should you be aware of? What should you be thinking about? When you're looking at a B2B customer, right, you're selling to a business. The buyer of the product and the user of the product can be completely different. The person who is buying the product may be the procurement guy, your IT team. The person who's using the product, or like the multiple stakeholders who are using the product, could be your marketing brand. A lot of companies, IT teams buy the software or the product that you're selling, but the users of the product are completely different. In B2C, your user is usually the buyer. In B2B, there can be multiple decision makers as well. Like you, in a sales cycle, you could have IT, your brand guy, your head of marketing, head of supply chain, all of them deciding on a product. B2C, it's usually a single decision maker, right? B2B customers look for expertise. They don't look for essential, the best deal, but they look for expertise. While in B2C, it may all be about engagement, acquisition, making sure that you can, show the best deal for the user who's going to buy the customer. B2B, the process is largely process-driven decision-making, while in B2C, it can be emotions-driven as well. As a product manager, right, when you're looking at a B2B customer, your customer interviews, feedback coming from the sales team, your customer success teams, all of that becomes primary. While in B2C, if you have a very large customer base, you're an e-commerce company, you have millions and millions of customers, all the data that you generate, the events, the way they engage with your platform, the way they engage with the website, the way they engage with your teams becomes the primary source of data. So as product managers, like when you hire product managers, you also need to see what is the expertise you're hiring for, what's the mindset you're hiring for, what product managers would really fit well in the type of customers you target. So it's very important to know be very clear about who are you targeting. and answer all the 4 questions in as much detail as you can before you start structuring or hiring product managers for your team. But once you've understood and answered these 4 questions, what are the different sort of structuring methods that people use? What are the different ways in which people structure a product team? So these are primarily 5 forms of ways in which people structure product teams, but not essentially an exhaustive list. These are the most common ways people really try to structure teams. And we'll talk through all 5 of them. We'll see what are the pros and cons of each one of them. And then I'll also, towards the end, give you an example of what we follow at Bizongo. How has that helped us? And how's that going moving forward? So the first of the product structures the team follows is a product or a feature-based structure. Second is a product manager skill-based structure. Third is a customer journey-based structure. Fourth is a performance metric. And fifth is cross-functional collaboration. I explain each one of them in the subsequent slides and what do they mean, how do people do it, and what's useful in each one of them, right? So product and product features. So when you have multiple product lines, right, or when you have a complex product with multiple features, people usually structure the product team in a way where each product manager is responsible for one feature or one product. What's the pro of this approach? You have clear roles defined. You have very defined focus area for each one of the product managers, that this is your product, this is your feature, make it successful. Results in much higher efficiency, much higher autonomy while shipping as well, because they can continuously do it. But what this can also result is people focusing too much on the feature or the product than the customer, right? The customer feedback validation may take a back seat. They may be pushing features in silos without being aware of the customer feedback, very focused on their area in itself, right? Without understanding the overall context. What can also happen is if you're building just for your feature and you're not thinking about the entire product, you can take decisions from an engineering standpoint which are not very, very useful. You may end up doing things which you do not, which don't give a engineering efficiency to the entire product, but only a feature to the particular, to the feature or the product you're working on. Right? So that's a con of the approach. Second one is the product manager skill based. So you would see larger companies usually follow this. You'll find like technical product managers, growth product managers, analytics product managers, sometimes design product managers in companies. The approach that people follow is, okay, I will hire for expertise. I will hire for the skill that I need in each one of these stages. So you have technical product managers who work with engineering teams very closely, making sure that they can work with them to translate the customer feedback, the requirements to the engineering team. There are delivery product managers who manage the entire project management, timelines. They will do all of that. Growth product managers specifically focus on acquisition and getting a larger set of people coming in. Technical and design and analytics product managers focused on data and design and making sure that you have the best UX. What's the pro of this approach? Higher efficiency, of course, higher productivity, because you have the best person for the job in each one of the stages, right? But it also results in too much dependency on expertise. It can create delivery risk, right? It can also slow down the task because you need to go for every small thing to the person who's the expert and he will only do it. There's no generalization. It can slow down the decision making and the delivery. That's why mostly used by larger companies rather than growth stage or early stage companies who are trying to grow very fast, because there a slowness in decision making and create a lot of impact, right? So that's something that you need to keep in mind before you do that. Okay, customer journey based structuring. What does that mean? If you look at a customer, right, even in B2B or B2C, in any of the segments, you can start the customer journey from consideration, the customer looking at your product, thinking about it, acquisition, like getting him into the funnel, having him generate a lead, or in B2C case, having him interact with your products. Then the purchase. Once he is purchased, you want him to repeat or retain. Like if he's purchased a B2B product, you want him to be retained. With a one-time purchase, you want him to repeat. And then advocacy. You want them to advocate your product to somebody else, like referrals, drive referrals, have customers talk about the product, drive testimonials, build trust. Each one of these journeys have very different connotations, very different focus areas, very different sort of mindset needed, right? So you could have your product team structured in a way where everybody is focused on one of these areas. Somebody focused on consideration and making sure that your ads, your basically growth, right? You make sure that a lot of your customers are coming and considering your product no matter what. Somebody focused on the funnel of acquisition, like you show up the right trust metric, you show up the right content to the customer so that they choose you as the best person to go ahead with purchase, retention, advocacy. In each one of the stages, you could have product managers focused on each one of them. How does it help? It helps by bringing a very clear focus in product managers and very clear, allows them some level of autonomy to decide, okay, I will make sure that the customer moves from one step to the next. Then the next person makes sure that he will move from one step to the next step. But while you do all of these, it's important to understand that there can be risks as well. In this approach, the risk is handoff, right? So your teams may start blaming each other and saying, okay, this guy did not do consideration well, so my acquisition is suffering. Or the acquisition guy did not do a good enough job, so my purchase is suffering, because it is at the end of the day a waterfall sort of a model. And in a waterfall sort of a model, there is always a risk of people not aligning well, not owning like the entire delivery of the customer, but actually just owning steps of it. So when you think about doing this, make sure that you have very set processes, very set, you've defined what the handoffs is, you have very set expectations from each one of them, and each one of them do not mix the stages together. Performance metric based, right? What does this mean? This means if you have business level KPIs and you have very clear KPIs that, okay, this is how I measure my business, this is how I measure my customer outcomes, this is how I measure profitability, this is how I measure, customer retention, I have very clear metrics, then you can use a performance metric based, where each of the product managers along with, product managers owns sort of this metric, and they drive with the team the success of this metric. Can be very useful because the focus is clear, very measurable. It's very easy to measure because it's also very easy to measure business impact because it's clear impact at the business level. Everybody knows the KPIs. Everybody is just, working with those. But if you're a growth company and you're evolving very fast, right, your KPIs are also changing fast enough, then it becomes difficult. Like you need to know that which side of KPIs won't change, what will happen, what will not happen. It can also lead to an over focus on numbers, right? You just for the sake of the numbers, people are executing while they're not focusing on the success of the company. That can be the risk in this approach, but you can follow this approach as and when you need to. Yeah. Cross-functional collaboration-based approach. This is the approach that we follow at Bizongo as well. And I want to focus on this approach because I feel for growth companies, this is one of the best approaches that you can follow because you're a small team trying to execute fast. You're trying to grow faster, and accountability is the thing that you need the most in this way. So cross-functional collaboration means goal-based cross-functional product pods. When I say cross-functional product pods, you build pods with product design, engineering, marketing, sales. In B2B case, sales and customer success, maybe in B2C case, marketing and customer support. But you build a pod focused on business goals. Like if you want to achieve a business goal, give it to a pod. Don't keep it fixed, keep the pods flexible. Like your business goals will change, your pods will keep taking newer business goals. What this leads to is high amount of collaboration and high amount of autonomy and high amount of ownership. The pod takes the ownership that I am responsible for this business goal. I will achieve it in whatever way possible, and I will be flexible, transparent. They can experiment with customers, they can come back with that experimentation, and they have all different viewpoints from the teams. All customer feedback, everything is being consolidated in the pod to be able to take that decision. They don't need to take approvals. They don't need to take anything. They can drive that experimentation, that achievement through and through. Sometimes function specific priorities can confuse the pod because there's a salesperson, customer, product, engineering. Everybody has some customer specific function specific priorities as well. That can confuse them. But most of the time, this works the best. Today at Bizongo, our value propositions, for example, are vendor management, supply chain automation, supply chain financing, art workflow, bidding. Each one of these are pods in themselves with sales, customer success, everybody in that pod. They are responsible for the success of it. For vendor management, they define the metric. Like the company doesn't define the metric. This is the value that you're giving to the customer. As a pod, what do you think is the success metric for you? Right? When you're pitching bidding as a platform to a customer, what do you think is the metric for them? So when across the company or across the entire segment, people accept that this is they accept the ownership, they're able to see it through. And there is a high degree of collaboration, a high degree of understanding of the product from each one of them. That brings about a large amount of success is what we've seen. But it also depends on the stage of the company, right? In a growth stage of the company, more speed matters more. So this delivers that speed and ownership. At a later stage, if efficiency matters more and getting it right matters more, you can choose for all of the others as well. At a very early stage, I feel cross-functional collaboration based pods work at every stage, but you need to choose for yourself whether you want to choose any of the others. But this has worked very well at Bizongo as well, where we've been able to deliver things fast with ownership, with feedback coming from the customers, with clear idea of experimentation and a clear idea of what the impact is going to be. So yeah, that's at an overall level, the 5 forms of structuring. Cross-functional collaboration based pod structuring is something that a lot of companies have started using in a growth stage because it helps you move faster. That's what we use at Bizongo as well. But when you look at hiring product managers, right, the fundamental basics remain the same. Hire for attitude, hire for problem solving, hire for them having that mindset of the product setup that you have, whether B2B or B2C, hire accordingly. And that will help you build the right product team and then give them the right structure to be able to be successful in the organization and for the organization to be successful in the larger market, right? So the right structure, hiring the right people and giving them the right structure is very important for the success of your organization. So think through this. Don't be afraid to experiment. There is no right or wrong answer in the structuring. When you structure an organization in a particular way, you're not going to be sure that the first time you'll get it right. So be open to experimentation. Don't be afraid. Choose anyone to get started with. Measure whether you're getting the required output. Just think like a product manager. Measure the success metric. If you see it working well, otherwise change it, and don't change it. I will call it evolve it, and that should take you to a structure that works for you at your organization. Perfect. Hope this was helpful to everyone, and you choose a structure for yourself for growth, which gives you the maximum amount of efficiency and value from your product. Thank you, everyone.